Welcome to the North American LCS 2018 Spring Split Team Liquid roster. We have Impact in the top lane, Xmithie in the jungle, Pobelter at mid, Doublelift at AD carry, and Ole is the support. This team has 5 LCS battle-tested members. All 5 have looked really strong on their respective teams, and all 5 have enjoyed success, both at the top of the league and also at the bottom. Uh, the only player we've seen in a liquid jersey before would be Doublelift, and as you remember, he saved the team from relegation about a year or so ago. After their experiment with Piglet finally finished and was deemed an unsuccess, we moved the old liquid out and we moved the new liquid in. Welcome to New Liquid, everybody. It kind of looks like Immortals, doesn't it? Let's see. We got Xmithie, Pobe, and Ole, all ex Immortals members. Unfortunately, Immortals, rest in peace. Didn't make it into the 2018 franchised LCS, which is another video's topic. And also, I'm sure has a lot of backstory and information that the public is not privy to, and a lot of Riot internal investigation went into to determine that, Immortals what maybe wasn't or wouldn't make the best fit for Riot moving forward. Anyway, Ole, Pobelter, and Xmithie all played together last year on Immortals. All played well, in my opinion. They all had, especially Pobelter and Xmithie's case, bounce back years in a sense. They looked like new players. They looked like they enjoyed the game. They looked like they had fun with the game, and they won a lot of games doing so. The Immortals roster, though, had its issues. It wasn't quite the necessary unit needed to beat TSM. That was the Immortals roster was built to beat TSM, but it wasn't quite leveled up to the point that it needed to be. This Liquid roster looks to fix those problems. So learn from Immortals' mistakes and try and make it better. So in the top lane, instead of the Korean Flame, we have the Korean Impact. And instead of the rookie Cody Sun, we have the veteran Doublelift. Two just straight, flat upgrades. Hard to see where anything could, take away, in some sense, from the Flame versus Impact or Cody Sun versus Doublelift. I think there's almost no universe where you would pick the Immortals player over the new Liquid player. So in that sense, great job, Liquid. You were able to go out and spend the money and get the players that make the team as good as potentially possible, filling the Immortals gaps. The only issue I could see is this developing into a split language team, which would be which causes a lot of kind of issues with the team's communication that maybe don't have to happen or completely don't exist in mono-language teams. Ole and Impact both speak English, though, so to varying degrees, obviously. It's not their first language. They're learning it as second language. Ole only came over to North America last year, but has been working incredibly hard on his English. Their coach, Kane, same thing. He's a Korean. He came over. Piglet, I think, in Breaking Point, was one of the players who was really adamant about bringing this coach over. And if you still watch their promotional stuff, he is still a very new English speaker, and that could have a lot of issues with him trying to convey concepts or ideas to these this English-speaking core of the team, in a sense, being the 3 middle players of the team. So Kane's potential issues communicating to Xmithie, Pobelter, and Doublelift, or him not getting the full message across of what he's trying to say, and Doublelift, Pobelter, and Xmithie all being very experienced, all being very strong-headed at times, all knowing the game to varying degrees, and all believing in themselves, right, to know this game. They've been playing it for so long. It's been their livelihood for so long that could create coaching problems for Kane. But in a different way, I see him having a great influence over especially Ole being one of the youngest players on the team. So Kane's ability to speak Korean to Ole and Impact will benefit them, to no doubt, but his inability to necessarily get the full idea of his English concepts and tactics across to Smithy Pobe and Doublelift could see could create a bit of an interesting coaching dynamic for Kane, where he maybe has to focus more of his time on his Korean players, especially Ole, is what I would imagine is he's doing to get them into the upper echelon of play. As Kane works with Ole and Impact, I hope Impact is kind of inspired by the competition he sees around him in North America to really work hard this year to find consistency and establish himself as the top Korean player in the league. I think he has the capability to do so in top lane this year. We're getting an interesting dynamic in top lane. So last year we had the Korean invasion. We got players in like Flame, Someday, and Looper, who came over from other regions, and their star power that they brought in name alone was enough to kind of turn heads and draw attention towards rosters that otherwise didn't have it. However, this year we're getting a bit of that in Huni. Huni's coming over, but we're also getting a shift back. So we have Licorice, we have Solo, Zig is still there, Darshan, of course, Hanser, of course. These are players who are all looking to establish the top hierarchy in a sense. So we have like a S tier, A tier, B tier, and C tier for all the positions. And I think top lane is one of those positions where any player can really work hard enough this year to get to a tier above or two tiers above where people are kind of slating them at the start of the season. But again, a lot of this is going to be like jungle influenced and team influenced. But solo 1v1 top lane is very much up in the air for me this year. Bottom lanes in lane are getting an upgrade. I think with almost without a doubt, we are forming some super duos this year. Uh, we kind of lost that when Rush Hour broke up at the end of 2015, but we're kind of getting that rebuilding of super teams where we have Doublelift and Ole coming together, Stixay Biofrost coming together. Cody Sunhaffer was going to be a very interesting lane. I can't wait to see how that works out because it's the Ole Stixay other coming together. Of course, we still have Sneaky Smoothie, which I see as being a super stable, super consistent bottom lane. Apollo Hakuho. But Sven and Mithi will also have a huge influence on how the bottom lane is being played as a whole. I think the whole league will have to kind of adjust to their European styles and tendencies and picks and the way they kind of go about the lane. I think could create a really unique dynamic for all the bottom lanes coming into the spring split, of course. Then looking at mid lane, Pobelter, super stable, consistent, year in, year out. He's done it over and over again. Team in, no matter who's around him, he seems to just kind of be that pillar of consistency, that pillar of Pobe. You know, he has his picks he prefers, obviously, and when the meta suits him, it really tends to suit him, and he can really shine. But I think he's adaptable as well. He's really hardworking that way. I've found throughout the years that he's been able to adjust in certain ways. Um, yeah, it's Pobelter. You should expect Pobelter to bring Pobelter's game. And while Pobelter is being his pillar of consistency, you gotta kind of look at his dynamic duo buddy in the jungle for him for the last year on Immortals, Xmithy. He's really had a redefining past, 12 to 18 months from when he left CLG, finding, having a hard split there when, the Rengar Kindred meta was super popular, and he had a few games and plays on Rengar that were the community was really hot about, I guess. And then he kind of was able to leave CLG, and when he went to Immortals, kind of the meta shifted more, and he was able to play his Jarvans, Rek'Sais, Sejuani's the real playmakers in a sense, not so much the people who are able to call the game and see it in a certain way. Certain champions favor those players over others, and I think Smithy is one of those players who sees the game in a certain way, and when he's facilitated through his champions and the players around him to play the game a certain way and dictate the style of how engagements happen and where we fight and how we fight. He's really enabled in a sense, and I think Immortals did a great job of allowing him to do that, basically. And he found great success on Immortals doing that, and I'm really looking for him to carry that into next season with his champion pool being stable and consistent. Hopefully the meta stays stable and consistent for him. Cinderhulk and Warrior metas tend to favor him more so than the Nidalees necessarily do. And we haven't seen Nidalee be meta in quite some time, apart from, the Koreans who are just insane on that champion. But when he is able to play his style with these teammates I see around him, who he's all played with before, minus Impact, but, that's definitely workable around. I expect them to develop quite a good duo topside, but also having great synergy with the rest of his map to be a really formidable jungler this year with his champion pool. Overall, I think this team is incredibly scary this year. They have no apparent weakness in lane. Um, Almost everybody on their team can play pretty much anything you would need them to play in any given scenario. Xmithy being the maybe only question mark in that regard, but it's jungle. Cinderhulk is still really strong right now, so at least in the current preseason meta. So I see him being able to kind of stay within his familiarity, within his comfort, and deliver game in and game out. That's the thing about this team that I find so scary is they seem so stable and consistent. Nothing like the old Immortals with, Dardoch in the jungle that had the insane variance from game in to game out. This old CLG style of Immortals now Liquid is just, it within Tony's structure of systems, and we do things a certain way because that's the right way, and it's the way that's going to garner us the advantage every time. Working through that type of mentality, that type of play style, makes this team very scary to beat. They're just going to keep gaining advantage on you over and over and over again, similar to the way the Koreans always beat the Western teams. You just look at the gold differential through time. The Koreans just keep separating the gold gap, the gold gap, the gold gap through, farm, macro, moving around the map just more efficiently, more effectively, collecting farm when other people are dropping it. Just gives them the advantage over and over and over again that allows them to consistently beat lower teams. I see this team. I don't see this team finishing below third, maybe fourth. Right? It has to be anything less than a top two finish for this team would be a failure. I think this team is dreaming of first. I think this team is just based on paper should be in the finals. Because when I look at it, I can't pick out a player and say, "Oh, if you had him instead of her, this team would be, decidedly better. This team would be definitely better because this one player was in instead of this one other." because we don't know how the team dynamic is actually working and the language in terms of Ole and Impact and their communication with one another, I think it's still safe to assume that they are going to finish top three. CLG, C9, TSM are the only teams I see putting this team against the wall throughout a full 40-minute game, throughout a full 35-minute game. Maybe a team can snowball, right? You get a Lyra abusing an Enix Smithy. Yes, this team can drop a game. Of course, best of ones, any team can drop a game this split. But I don't see this team dropping anything to less than the best, less than an outstanding outplay by one team over another, just based on how consistent and how well I expect these all five of these players to perform week in and week out in the LCS. It's going to make them a very hard team to beat, but not unbeatable. Ole has shown weaknesses in the armor. Doublelift is a definitely tiltable player in some regards. Of course, he's worked on it over the years, and I'm sure his time at TSM has helped him with people like Weldon and their ability to work on themselves outside the game because their in-game mechanics are just so strong, and they've been doing it for so long. Makes Liquid a very experienced team, makes them a very strong individual team, and putting those together are going to create a very resilient team, I think. It's going to be like CLG with Afromoo in a sense, that even if they're down, 3, 4K by, let's say 30 minutes, you always believe that they might have the chance, just take that dragon fight. Maybe if they take that Baron fight, get the right look, they can turn the team fight and end up securing the objective and eventually winning the game. In-game shot calling, it's going to be Doublelift and Xmithy. I think it's going to be English dominated again, except for when Impact and Ole need to use their abilities. When they need to have a voice, they will have one. Just Impact learning from C9, Ole learning from Immortals, and having the history with Xmithy and Pobelter will tell them that. But throughout the game, dictating the playstyle, dictating the pace of the game when they're ahead is going to be Doublelift. It's going to be, I am Doublelift, I know what I want, this is how we get what I want, let's go secure the objective, let's go secure the bag, let's get the win. And I think that makes them an incredibly dangerous team, right? You saw what TSM and Doublelift's voice did last year. A lot of the same stories are going to happen to teams that aren't prepared to deal with Liquid's aggression, teams that aren't prepared to deal with Liquid's team fighting, teams that aren't prepared to deal with Ole sitting in a bush and picking your mid laner. It's gonna create a very fun team to watch and a very scary team to play against. And unless something spicy happens in finals or playoffs, we're going to see them top 2, top 3. Almost no doubt in my mind. This team has an incredibly low or incredibly high skill floor, right? A lot of the teams are starting this season around like this level of play. I see Liquid starting it, here. So they're already that far ahead. Everybody's got to play a bit of catch up.